You're telling me humans have just been watching this entire time? The room fell silent as General Corvo of the Zin Consortium stared at the holographic display. Every other race in the intergalactic coalition had already thrown everything they had into the war effort, exhausting their resources in the long and bloody struggle against the Kidari. Yet somewhere in the background, humans had lingered. They had sent aid, sure, and provided logistic support, but direct military action? Not a single human ship had entered the fray until now. Yes, General, replied Admiral Merrick of the Chak Union, his scaled face betraying no emotion. Humanity officially declared its intent to engage in combat operations as of 10 minutes ago. Corvo rubbed his temples in disbelief. He had heard rumors of human capabilities, but dismissed them as exaggerated Deathworlder bravado. Now, facing the cold reality of the situation, he felt a strange mixture of anxiety and curiosity. Why now? And more importantly, what were the humans planning to do in a conflict that had dragged on for years? Show me their initial movements, Corvo ordered, his voice a touch sharper than intended. The holographic map of the galaxy zoomed in on the contested sectors. The Kidari fleet had established formidable defensive lines in key star systems, daring anyone to challenge them. Humanity's forces had materialized at the edge of the battlefield, a mere blip against the vast armadas of their enemies. As the human signature warships emerged on the display, whispers circulated among the assembled coalition commanders. Human ships were sleek and compact, lacking the imposing size and bulky weapon arrays of other species. They seemed, at first glance, grossly underprepared. That's it, someone muttered skeptically. Corvo narrowed his eyes at the display, watching as the human vessels formed a tight formation. There was no grand show of force, no drawn-out posturing. In fact, to the untrained eye, it appeared almost absurdly minimal: a lone command ship, a scattering of destroyers, and a squadron of escort frigates. The humans had committed what looked like a fraction of their fleet. The room filled with an unsettling quiet as everyone processed what they were seeing. The Kidari responded almost immediately, shifting their forces to meet the new threat. The enemy had no reason to take the human force seriously. After all, no one else had managed to break their lines in years. Then it began. Corvo blinked, hardly believing his eyes. The human ships moved with precision that bordered on artistry, cutting through space with alarming speed. Within seconds, the coalition's network of communication channels buzzed with reports of electromagnetic pulses and sensor jamming. For the Kidari, it was like being blindfolded in the middle of a storm. What are they doing? Admiral Merrick's usually composed demeanor cracked, his voice betraying a hint of awe. Electronic warfare, Corvo replied, his tone uncertain. But this is on a scale I've never seen before. The Kidari fleets floundered as their targeting systems and defensive measures became little more than dead weight. Human ships darted in and out of formation with a grace that seemed almost casual, launching volleys of high-velocity projectiles. It wasn't the brute force assaults the coalition had grown used to seeing. This was something else, warfare reduced to a deadly ballet. "Sir, the Kidari's outer defenses are collapsing," a comms officer reported, eyes wide as he stared at the data streams flooding in. Corvo leaned forward in his seat, focusing intently on the display. This was the moment. Would the humans press their advantage or fall back? His doubts were immediately answered when the human fleet accelerated, exploiting the chaos they had created. Their tactics shifted fluidly, seemingly predicting the Kidari's every attempt at countermeasures. How are they? Morak began trailing off as he watched another sector fall to the human advance. It's as if they knew exactly where to strike. Corvo couldn't help but marvel at the spectacle. The humans moved with an efficiency that was almost inhuman, and their strategy defied conventional military logic. Most species threw waves of ships at their enemies, relying on overwhelming force to break through defenses. Humans, on the other hand, used precision strikes, disabling critical systems and leaving the Kidari fleet to flounder like a beast stripped of its senses. "What kind of weaponry are they using?" one of the coalition officers blurted out, his tone a mix of horror and fascination. "Their weapons seem conventional," a tactical analyst stammered, "but they're using them in ways we never considered." As the minutes ticked by, the coalition command room descended into stunned silence. A full hour had passed since humanity's first engagement, and the Kidari's mighty armadas were reduced to a fragmented, retreating mess. Even the coalition's most optimistic projections hadn't accounted for this level of effectiveness. Corvo watched as the holographic map updated, showing Kidari strongholds going dark one after another. This wasn't just a victory. It was a dissection. The humans weren't merely overpowering the enemy. They were tearing apart the Kidari's entire battle doctrine. "Sector Gamma has fallen," the comms officer announced, breaking the silence. "Reports indicate no human losses." "Impossible." Morak, his scaled features twitching in disbelief. "How can they sustain 0 casualties?" Corvo swallowed hard, his eyes locked onto the tactical feed. The human fleet continued its relentless advance, their ships weaving through debris fields and evading incoming fire with an ease that seemed almost playful. As another Kidari command ship was reduced to a ball of flame, it became evident that this was no fluke. The humans were not just skilled, they were on a completely different level. "I don't understand," Corvo admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "What have they been doing all this time if not fighting?" "Preparing," a new voice spoke, cold and analytical. All heads turned to see a human officer standing at the doorway, clad in a crisp uniform devoid of ornamentation. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, scanned the room as if assessing each individual's worth. "You call this a war?" he continued, striding forward to the center of the room. "But to us, it's an exercise. A test of tactical adaptability." The coalition officers exchanged uncertain glances. The human's tone was neither boastful nor arrogant. It was matter-of-fact. Corvo clenched his jaw, unsure whether to feel anger or grudging admiration. "What's your objective?" Corvo demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Why now?" The human officer tilted his head slightly, as if considering how to best explain something painfully obvious. "Our objective," he began, "is to end this conflict in the most efficient manner possible. And as for why now, we waited until you were ready to accept our methods." Corvo felt a shiver run down his spine. The words were simple, almost benign, yet they carried a weight that suggested something far beyond what any of them had anticipated. "Ready? You think we were ready for this?" Morak scoffed, shaking his head. The human's gaze turned to the holographic map, where the last remnants of the Kidari forces were being systematically dismantled. "If you weren't," he replied calmly, "this war would have ended much sooner." Corvo stared at the map, struggling to process the unfolding events. The humans were pushing toward the heart of Kidari territory, their advance so rapid it defied explanation. And yet, as he watched, a thought began to form, one he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. Just what kind of war had humanity been preparing for all this time? Corvo's eyes stayed fixed on the holographic display as the humans pressed deeper into Kidari territory. The coalition commanders around him remained silent, transfixed by the near absurdity unfolding before them. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. It was dissecting its opponents, exploiting every weakness, with a precision that bordered on supernatural. "Report," barked Admiral Merrick, breaking the silence. "What's the status of the CR Central Command?" The tactical officer's eyes darted between screens, hands trembling as he processed the incoming data. "Central Command it's failing, sir. The humans have neutralized their shield arrays, and they're launching boarding pods as we speak." Corvo felt his jaw clench involuntarily. The Kidari Central Command was a fortress, protected by layers of defenses that had held against every coalition assault for years. Now those defenses were failing one by one, like brittle glass under a relentless hammer. Boarding pods, Merrick echoed, his tone a mixture of disbelief and horror. They're going inside? The human officer standing nearby merely nodded, his expression impassive. Yes, he said simply, we find that surgical strikes are more effective than brute force. Our objective is to seize control, not annihilate. Corvo glanced at the officer, unable to suppress a sense of dread. These humans, with their calm demeanor and deliberate actions, were nothing like the rabid warriors he had expected. They were methodical, calculating, and frighteningly detached from the chaos they were orchestrating. How are they managing this? Another coalition commander asked, his voice shaky. We've been fighting the Kidari for years and barely dented their defenses. And now this. Training, the human officer replied matter-of-factly. We've trained for scenarios like this long before we even encountered the Kidari. Space warfare, ground combat, electronic countermeasures. It's all part of the doctrine. Doctrine? Corvo repeated, narrowing his eyes. You make it sound like you expected this war. The human officer turned to face Corvo, his expression betraying nothing. Expected? No. Prepared for? Always. The response sent a chill through the room. The coalition had gone to war out of necessity, driven by a desperate need to defend their territories from the Kidari onslaught. But the humans? They had been preparing for war as if it were an inevitability. And now, as Corvo watched the human fleet systematically dismantle the Kidari defenses, he realized that this was not just a show of military might. It was a demonstration of control. General Corvo, a voice crackled through the command room speakers, interrupting his thoughts. It was one of the coalition's reconnaissance officers stationed near the Kidari border. The Kidari flagship is moving. It's trying to retreat to a more fortified sector. Let me guess, Morak said, his tone laced with bitter sarcasm. The humans have already anticipated that. The human officer didn't so much as blink. Of course. They'll allow the flagship to retreat for now. It's an old tactic. Push them to their last bastion, where they feel safe, then remove even that sense of security. Corvo couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're toying with them? He asked incredulously. Not toying, the human officer corrected, his voice devoid of emotion. We're ensuring that when they fall completely. No room for recovery. No chance to regroup. This war ends now. As the last Kidari stronghold fell and their flagship was surrounded, Corvo felt the crushing weight of inevitability descend upon him. The humans had not just entered the war, they had taken control of it. In a matter of hours, they had shattered the Kidari's military dominance, leaving no room for anyone to challenge their supremacy. And somewhere deep inside, General Corvo realized with growing dread that he had just witnessed the future of warfare. It wasn't about strength. It was about precision, and humanity had mastered it.